Trading the foreign exchange market carries high risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Trading on margin, utilizing leverage can carry an even higher level of risk that can lead to a complete loss of investment funds. So before deciding to trade the foreign exchange market or using any of our software alert products, you should carefully and diligently consider your personal investment objectives, level of experience, and risk tolerance. There is a possibility that you could potentially sustain significant loss. You should not invest any capital or trade that you cannot afford to lose. It is your responsibility to be aware of and understand all risks associated with foreign exchange trading and to seek professional advice from an independent certified financial advisor if you have any doubts. Auvoria Prime does not exercise trading authority over your trades. You and you alone exercise discretionary trading authority over every trade.
So welcome, Auvoria, Steve Vetterl on the mic. This is Saturday, the 13th. So welcome, everyone. I know we've had a lot of new subscribers, had a lot of things going on in the last week. A couple of big announcements as well, so please stay tuned. Let me switch over to the Forex Factory calendar. Also, please, if you would, how do I sound? How does the screen look? Are we coming across okay? Do keep in mind the Q&A window is open. Please put all questions in the Q&A window as we go ahead and go through first the Forex Factory. I've decided to, I think I'm going to take each, like maybe a segment once I get past the for those that want to sort of stick around, I'm going to keep talking about the Forex and charts and stuff. Maybe go through it a little bit quicker today. So please post any exotics or abnormal crosses that you want me to look at outside of the usual bunch. But what I'm going to try and do is focus on a segment each week that talks a little bit in more depth about the software. I'll show you the disclosures related to it. I'll show you what's going on. Today's focus is going to be Neo. Okay. I think Neo is a lot easier to, and currently as far as all of the software that we have, and this isn't really sort of me picking favorites, if you will, but from a risk management standpoint, this is basically the easiest to use without having to trade manually like Arrow, right? While I am really applaud the developers in Arrow and Nathan and his team and all the guys that have been killing it inside multiple rooms, it does take some time and one does need to show up. So if, you know, jobs, life, travel, whatever, family gets in the way, you don't necessarily have the opportunity for that, but you want something that is a lot lower risk and requires a lot less settings and paying attention, although I always hesitate to make that statement because then I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, you know, I could just, you know, put these particular settings on, turn it on, and, you know, not pay any attention to it going forward, which I think is a mistake because there's always changes in the marketplace. But Neo, which just trades one currency, and that's GBP CAD in either mode 1, 2, or both, 1 versus 2 varying degrees of risk, really has some pretty significant numbers. And while I'm not going to tout a lot of that and get into performance, I will show the live account. But if you really want to see the nitty gritty of the performance, looking at Quant Analyzer, which is just a fairly sophisticated strategy and a stats based piece of software that can run, you know, through all of the history. And one of the great things these guys have put like really good data in it, which I think is key. I know it's something that Dasan always tries to focus on a lot when he's doing his back testing, which I think is great. Putting good data in it. So I'll go through in that, and do keep in mind, if you guys haven't seen, and I guess I probably should always start off with this. We had an update done as I requested to our social media channels. One sort of note with this, I guess I always give everybody the benefit of the doubt with this stuff, but it has come to my attention that we have a lot of trolls that are trying to get into the room and figure out, you know, what's going on. And, you know, I think the easy access to these rooms via some of these channels has maybe made it easier. And albeit I don't pay a lot of attention to trolls out there because, you know, they come at me on Twitter when I make particular calls. Especially when I made that huge call a number of years ago to sell all of your Bitcoin at 20,000 a coin. I took a lot of flack for that. And the call was dead right. So, and that's a great thing about Twitter is everything's time stamped. So if they think you're full of it for whatever reason, they can always scroll back to when you post stuff real, which is a big benefit, in my opinion, of time stamping calls. But it really wasn't for the lack of any great insight on my part related to Bitcoin. It was just that, keep in mind, I posted this in the chat room if you guys want links to all this, but there's a number of, obviously the developers Telegram channels, as you guys can see right here. But then in addition to that, they have all kinds of chat rooms related to it. Obviously, all the replays each week, of which is the most important thing of my calls, as well as the developer calls. So those are social media. Let me just show this real quick as well. I am always surprised each week by the people like, hey, you have a Telegram channel? How do I get on there? And what is the link? And so this is my Market Watch with yours truly Telegram channel. I try and forward everything that goes on. So you guys can see there's the NEO information. There is the information as Tyler typically has had. This is variable right here, the developer insight recap. And then both 1 and 2 of a rather extensive gearbox recap posts that Tyler's had in addition to his calls. And I'll tell you, if anybody really deserves some credit at this firm for just putting in just mad work besides Susan, it's Tyler. I mean, I is just really trying to get this software just exceptionally dialed in as far as an EA and tuned and everything's smoothed out. So sort of hats off to Tyler for putting in all this effort. But I know that there are a lot of subscribers out there that, for whatever reason, don't have the kind of time or maybe the inclination, which I think sad. My hope is I will inspire some inclination and maybe a more aggressive stance toward education. But, I do understand there are, things going on in people's lives globally. So that's why I figured I'd focus on Gearbox at some other point down the road, because it does require a lot more management of, whereas something like a variable, which I'm going to talk about next week, requires not as much work. We're trying to get Dasan, as I think he's working fairly feverishly with variable. This is the channel right here, to get red folder events dialed into the software so that it pauses itself and you don't need to manually pause, because we have had some issues with folks not manually pausing the software, going through a big red folder news event, which I'm about to show, and then taking the accounts into drawdown. But essentially, Stratimus has got the channel out now. I'll focus a little more on that at some point down the road. But let's talk a little about the news. Let's talk a little about the Forex calendar for next week. So for those trading anything AUD, which is tomorrow, guys, just understand Lowe speaks. He's one of the big central bankers in Australia. These guys have actually done a pretty decent job in pulling out of this, hence the strength in their currency. So my hat's off to the Australian folk. We could certainly learn from something that, from this group at the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank. Monday is nothing going on. It's probably a good day to trade, good day to have everything on. The Tuesday, the 16th, I don't know that I'd be as concerned about this. Normally I say that, but now since the market is constantly trying to smoke out any potential inflation, right? Especially now that the stimulus package number 3 has further drug our country into debt in the trillions, as many of you may know, underlying and devaluing event for our currency. And now there is checks coming to almost every American within an income window. And a lot of this money is probably going to make it into what I always call primary dealer accounts, which is just a sophisticated term for brokerage accounts, right? So a good chunk of this, I think, among the millennials, at least, that are employed, are going to probably be dispensed into equity markets. So with that being said, in purchasing in many other areas, there could certainly be some inflation creeping up, but Market's got a whiff of that. Bonds sold off big, yields popped huge. And then everything completely reversed last week. So it's like back on the heroin, right? And yeah, it's a good post. Judson, love it. Spend those AP stimulus checks on AP licenses. I love it. You guys actually be pushing that. That's a pretty good idea. And think about that. In any case, I'm just putting mine in my kids' college funds. So the retail sales there Wednesday, a lot more stuff going on here. Okay, keep in mind that I only look at red folder events for the question I just got. I, get rid of the orange and yellows here and just apply the filter for red only. But essentially Wednesday got a lot more stuff going on the 17th, right? So if you're using Variable or Einstein or Alexander, you're accepting trades, just be aware, or accepting trades from anything, just be aware of these events in terms of time. Switch the time up to your calendar. We have them set here approximately 10:15, but this is Pacific time. And you always want to make sure you go forward to the current week, just like I did there, and then you're looking at the current week. So there's something going on in every area except for Europe. So for the European only currency pairs, no, you're only anything going on Wednesday. Thursday, we've got British stuff. So just be careful. Keep in mind, a lot of these GPP pairs, whether it be majors, crosses, exotics, whatever, some have been going pretty wild. So do note that. I know that I think with Desan, if I'm not mistaken, he's taken some of the GBP pairs out of his trading lists for variable this week. I think at least on the conservative, larger allocation account, if I'm not mistaken. But double check that. I could be wrong on that on my Telegram channel. But also I want to say it's pretty much it. Let's go into the markets. Okay. I would start off with the S&P. Have a lot of U.S. residents and subscribers, obviously. Many of you have investments in equities. So all-time highs in the S&P. One thing that is important to note among these 500 largest capitalized companies in this country is the fact that the NASDAQ has pulled back. So we've had a nice rotation out of tech into other stuff, right? So companies like Berkshire Hathaway have gone to new highs. Certainly a lot of the infrastructure stocks, Deere, Cat. Just be aware of that. It's an interesting little rotation that's taken place out of tech and into broader sectors. So our current analysis is now going to include 7 and 10-year treasuries. This is that inflation thing I've talked about. Markets have been concerned about that, hence the sell-off in the price of a bond, right? This is a mixed ETF that iShares runs that is a 7 and 10-year treasury. But the point of this and the point of the TLT that we're looking at is just for a quick understanding into what's going on in the bond market. Because believe it or not, credit markets and equities are duly important when they are somewhat aligning with currency markets as we are now. So in terms of hints of what could happen, note that we finished Friday with a pretty significant move down into, let me just show this here. That's about as best as I'm going to get it. Gap down, This is telling us from the standpoint of the 20-year that there's maybe a little more inflation coming in this market than they expect, and that's not good for equities, right? So how does this all play out to dollar? Because essentially we're moving to the dollar analysis, and this is some half-ass trend line I drew last week. But the point I was trying to make with this is that trend lines can break pretty quick, and then your analysis needs to be readjusted and or the software. Now, we're not trading DXY, obviously, but it starts with the basic analysis of this first from a daily chart perspective, right? And then we're back inside this range. It's been containing us since the 26th of November, right? So approximately 2.5 months this year and a month, arguably in a week or so. So we're, almost to 3.5 months of being inside this range. What does that mean for US? In terms of the euro, now we're back inside that upper range as well. You can see this is a daily chart. Each of these candles represents a single day. Red for up, green, or whatever the hell you call that teal color for up, red for down, back inside the range, right? Let's take a look at Euro GBP. Now note, see if we can drag this up. Note the last 3 days of EG here essentially has had 3 dojis. Okay, these are indecision candles. They may not be perfect dojis, obviously, by definition, but I don't really care. The context I take away from this is that we've paused and then we moved back up, right? So just note that whenever you see a lot of these dojis, oftentimes it can signal a change in direction. That's important to note, at least on a larger time frame like a daily chart, because you want to make sure, if you're using a software that has the ability to adjust, but it's got to be done manually between trending, right, versus just basing along a particular. Keep in mind, I talk a lot about basing, right? Basing is really just a particular range where it's auctioning back and forth between a particular high point being resistance and a support point being at the bottom, right? So we've been balancing essentially inside this range for most of the DXY and Euro USD, but this one has just been trending down, right? So if you're looking on a daily and, we don't really have any support points, although ideally this is a short-term support point, right? Probably should draw a line here with our squeeze zone indicator, but it's hasn't met its criteria to draw a line. Let's draw our own line. Just click this button to save it. All right, so that's that. Let's go back to the weekly. Let's clean this up. There we go. Yeah, we got our new support line. Don't know how strong it is. I would imagine that we will continue down to this area somewhere in the 85 area is really what I think we're headed. Move over to Euro JPY. Again, broken out. Don't have a lot of clarity on this one, right? We know that probably it's headed to this direction, but when and how long, I don't know. Bottom line is this thing's in trend up on the weekly. It's in trend up on the daily, okay? GBP, USD, same thing. Daily chart back inside the range. Note we've had a slight revision up with this orange line, which usually tells you from the definition of the squeeze zone indicator that this could be extended up in terms of this line moving up. So that's sort of a higher propensity, if you will, to maybe move back up and set the range somewhere in this area. So that's what I would expect from this currency, given any really crazy news that shows up. Let me double check one of these questions I just got asked. So all questions with the question I just got, the questions that you guys want to ask me, please put them in the Q&A window that you can open up. By the way, if you didn't know, guys, I get this question a lot too. Inside of Zoom, if you want, you can actually open up the settings. This is the little software. I actually download the version that goes on the desktop, because I use this for a lot of other business. You can actually go into the settings and keep the actual controls on, just so you know. As I diverge. So let's take a look at the GBP CAD. Wanted to show this one because on the daily had a big move, right? So we've with this currency, we've had a lot more volatility recently since the 24th of February, when we had, which was arguably an island reversal here, albeit sloppy. Ideally, you want an island reversal to open up, gapped up much higher outside of the previous day's range, and then come back down inside it. Okay. So it's an island reversal. It's typically a very strong reversal signal that we saw here, although maybe not the best chart pattern to prove it out, but we came back down underneath, which the orange line represents. That tells me that we're probably, in many cases, going to auction back down to the other range, as I mentioned. So essentially that's trending down, right, for this particular currency, albeit tight range and steep. GBP CHF. I know this one has been very much asked of the analysis, and we're up here on the daily and nosebleed section, right? So you got to move to the weekly chart to see what's going on. And I would ideally like to see what happens in this area. You could probably see anywhere between the 3270-ish area all the way to 3400 is probably going to be the magnet that draws this into. How long, when, I don't know. Could be completely dead wrong on this analysis and have it reverse back down, right? But every time it's poked its head up here, we're up against a trend line we now broke, right? So if you look at a longer term trend line on a weekly chart, this isn't the best drawing, but see how we broke that for the first time? And you can move these around, but regardless of how you position this line, we've broken a weekly trend line. This has a tendency in longer term portfolios, especially because there's some stops up here, to have, the algos love to hunt this. If we close outside of an upper trend line on a weekly, which we did last week, right? And then we furthered that. A lot of stops are going to get blown out on longer term positions that institutions may have. And there are algos out there that will exploit that. So I typically, at least on this currency, there's no way, just from this analysis the last 2 weeks, that I would be taking any shorts unless we got all the way up to a bigger area. And this is where the problem is with some software, because many subscribers don't know, they haven't seen my weekly analysis, which is a shame. Spread the word, but it would have kept them from taking those trades that would have been shorting the pound Swissy, right? I just haven't been a fan of it. Yes, there are trades that have worked out in the last week shorting, right? But for the most part, the trend has been up. And hell, when we broke out of this, look how it was short and sweet here on the daily, right? And look at this. Technically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days of a one time framing up, meaning that institutions are willing to buy on this break, right? Whether it be a short squeeze or initiative buying by institutions, doesn't matter. It's just pushing the price of this currency up, and that's what's key. I don't have any analysis on Bitcoin other than if you guys want to buy it at this current level, good luck to you. Hey, I hope I'm wrong and it goes to the moon, right? Let's take a look at the Bitcoin chart real quick. I'm not going to go through a lot of these exotics because this analysis just begins to run together with everybody. But just note what's been going on with gold. Obviously, we're in a lower zone of support and resistance, been bouncing around between that. Here's Bitcoin. Every time there's a pullback, it goes back up. Arguably the people that were posting, hey, I was right, we bought in here, they're much higher, right? So I just ideally would like to see it back down somewhere in this zone of support on some sort of big exogenistic event or some rotten piece of news on this, right? Could be something like, hey, Elon Musk and Tesla just sold a whole bunch of Bitcoin, right? Makes it crash down to this level. That's typically where I'm a buyer on something, is dice rolls this, right? So, most of this, and where I began to really build a lot of haters publicly, which was funny, was at the previous high right here. So if you actually scroll back to some of my Twitter stuff, you can actually see where I'm like, this is bananas. If I were all you guys, I would sell the vast majority of my coins and maybe look to buy it back down against the 4,000 level again. So it wasn't any insightful technical analysis, just oversoldness. And, sure enough, got back down to the 40 whatever 100 level. I bought it at about 3,900 in the summer of 19, and it didn't really do crap for us. It going from 4 to 12, which is a triple, is not that big deal when you only have about 5 or 6 grand in something like this that I did. But it paid off handsomely. But I think the easy money's been made. So unless somebody has some super strong argument as to why it's going to spend most of its time, the rest of its life up in this area, then you can certainly argue if we're going to pull back down into this area, maybe a buy point. But do yourselves a favor and don't be like the idiots that are putting their entire net worth or mortgaging their house or second mortgaging some sort of asset to put money into Bitcoin at the highs. It's your own damn funeral, guys, if it doesn't work out for you. Dollar Swiss. Let's take a look at that. I think I went through this, didn't I? Start off with the daily chart always. If you're in nosebleeder, which we... All right, so it poked its head above this line. You can see where the big support is right here from a longer term perspective on the day. Let's jump to weekly. And you can see where the support is right in here. Anywhere in this zone, its reaction against that was a reversal. So you notice on this weekly candle here, we formed a doji last week. I don't know if you guys can see that. See this doji candle? It's an indecision candle in the week. Does that mean it's going to pause and reverse, or pause and continue higher? A lot of that's going to be dependent upon where the dollar heads, right? I mean, dollar has been, and it looks like a couple of guys joined me late here. Here's the dollar chart on the daily. All right, it's been stronger off of its low point, which was right down here in the very low 89 area, the teens, and then it's moved all the way, essentially a full $2, pulled back from that level. Wouldn't it be interesting? Wouldn't it be interesting? Actually, get rid of this line. If we paused here in the dollar, which wouldn't surprise me at all, we're going to be back down, continue our move downward right to 85, which ultimately I think is going to happen. But a couple of days of pausing, right? Form a couple of dojis and then just come in and blast through. Because there's a lot of folks in there putting stops in right in this level, right? So more than likely the market's going to go back up and test that. Let's keep that in mind when you're looking at here's the CAD back down at that lower level again. Keep in mind this is daily again. So we're back at the edge of the cliff here as far as US dollar weakness in relation to the Canadian. AUD CAD still within a range, right? Not much to be said for that. Holding on this support at this point. A couple of dojis on this lift took us back down again to the 100-day yellow line. WGBP CHF, I think I did, right? They're all falling together. So this one, we're at the high on the daily. Let's jump to weekly. Ultimately, I think this is the point that's really going to be defended by institutions, is 76 in the teens level right here. 76, 15, 20, something like that. Yeah, shorting is betting against the downside. That's correct. Not necessarily taking sells. Remember, there's 2 ways to participate as a short seller. You can, and this more applies to the options market. You can buy puts, right? You're buying a put option. You're expecting the market to go down, right? So you take a position with a particular strike price in an option. You're betting for the market to go down, right? It's just basically buying a put. You're also a bear or betting on the downside as you're actually selling a call, right? So you can actually sell the right for a buyer to buy a call from be a seller. It's what's called a writer. They're the only ones that really make money in the long term in the option market. It's rarely the purchasers of puts or calls. It's typically the writers of those contracts. So the people that are putting them to you, what they call a writer of the contract, is usually the one that makes the money. Just keep that in mind if you're ever getting sucked into options, which I'm not a fan of, and I don't trade a lot of because there's multiple Greeks and statistical stats that have to be measured. And I don't care how good your algo is. You have time value loss of money in trading options, meaning that you can wake up the next day and your Tesla, April 800 strikes, which have been doing fabulously all week. You wake up Monday morning, even though Tesla's, has been in a correction, and they just get absolutely clobbered for no reason, right? Stock hasn't moved. It's called time value loss of money. You wake up the next day, it's worth a lot less. But you can also wake up and buy an option on a call side. And there's many that'll do this on the day of expiration, maybe for some huge pop in the stock. And many of these options can go up 4 or 5, in some cases, 10-fold from your buy point. All right, so I've answered many of these questions. Hello, Mark here and team. Setting up Neo for next week. I had a few people that I know. Can you go over risk percentage of different accounts? Mark, do me a favor. Can you elaborate on this? Because I don't. I see your question posted twice. But have you guys watched? And actually, you know what, Mark? Do me a favor with that. I actually want to see that. I'm going to put my email in here. Do not share the email with trolls. All right. It's svettel@auvoriaprime.com. Here's the rule for everybody that's new. If you guys send me an email, I encourage it. I want a fully verified MyFX book or FX Blue hooked up to the account. I understand this is a pain in the ass. I promise you it will be a beautiful thing for you from a statistical and an analysis perspective. And as you guys know, everything with me is about risk management, right? So, and you can set that up. You can email me a link to it. You can hide whatever you want, or cover it up or cut the screen or whatever. I don't send or share the links with anybody. I typically delete them immediately from a risk perspective because I don't even want them in my inbox. Okay. So if you send that to me, I can see what took place inside the account. Maybe forward it to Fernando and the guys for analysis, right? But let's take a look at GBP CAD. So this is the currency. Let's go to the daily chart here. This is the currency that Neo trades. Trades it for 2 hours a day. This is the only currency pair it trades. It trades it in mode 1 and 2. So the first thing I would do is know the difference between mode 1 and mode 2. And actually, let me double check. I think I forgot to answer that question here. Let me open that up. All right. All right, so here is the Neo channel. If you guys can see this, let me know. I would make sure your guys are attending this weekly call registration. Obviously, you guys want to go through the videos and tutorials in the AP Academy, obviously, but the announcement or the main channel, this is the main channel, and they have a chat channel as well right here. Okay. So if you guys are with Neo, make sure, and these are just the accounts for trading, but make sure you guys are attending all these calls because I cannot take the place of Fernando in terms of explaining what went on. We had a big move in the currency. Okay. The Neo only trades for 2 hours a day, right? So the thing I do like, I wish all the developers did this, and look, I get it. A lot of other software takes a lot more trades. It's maybe tough to do, but this summary I think is really cool, right? So here's the summary of last week up into Friday, right? Clean week without any stop losses on either mode, no manual interventions, total trades 13, mode 1, mode 2. If your trades for one's team is different than this, you want to double check that your settings are right, right? I mean, there's not a lot of stuff to adjust with this, which is one of the reasons I like it. As a long-term track record, it's done very well. So, I mean, this is something that should absolutely be part of, multiple access passes that you have for software. I would have this and an arrow and have another one if you can afford it. So if anything's different than this, let me know. Cool. Now, the question with this particular gentleman, and I know there was a lot of people that I don't know why I can't get inside the head of all of the leaders around the world, but I just find it absolutely flabbergasting that leaders have not directed their team the best way, right? Hey, geez, there's a surprise, right? Napoleon from the old days, right? But leading them all to slaughter. But really the leaders should focus on listening to the developers' calls. These developers are much smarter than I in relation to how their software works. I try to just stay big picture, obviously. But I'm also looking at this from probably a very different perspective than a lot of subscribers at Auvoria, in that I'm looking basically to deploy large chunks of capital into the best or the groups of best software for clients. And so I come at this from a more of an institutional perspective in terms of valuing risk versus reward, right? And there's always going to be crazy moves in the currency markets, as we certainly saw with a fairly abnormal move. But look again back towards September, right? The moves that we've seen these moves before, right? So, you just have to look to see what kind of settings you were on and, what kind of heat you took. So with this big old reversal, more than likely there, it's coming back down inside here. There's been a lot of, actually, let me double check one other thing. So it's a relatively stable geopolitical environment, so cleared to enable both modes through this week is what Fernando and the team has said. So the question is, can you give examples of default settings? I'm going to default on that because mostly I just want you guys to sort of force to be watched, is to watch the launch call of Neo. Do you guys know how to get to that? So I'll follow along here if you will, please. Here's how you get to that. My favorite social media channels. I always post this. It's posted, by the way, right now in my Telegram group. And then you just go to the developers' insight calls, go to them on Vimo, okay? And then you can see the launch call. This is Neo in this case. You guys should have all this stuff bookmarked and your team should be watching this, right? So you got to go through, you don't necessarily have to go through every one of these, but I would at least go into, some of the early calls on this. It'll show you exactly how the settings are. Really, it's just a matter of choosing either mode 1 or 2, right? And then setting your initial trade size, depending on dollar size. And they go through some examples of that, of which I have not had the privy to get into at this point. But the interesting thing I always find with people is when they don't understand the settings, is something as simple as just trade size, right? You can never go wrong by having a 0.01 per 10K, right? And that sounds kind of ludicrous. Most people are like, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to make any money. Well, that's true. But in the beginning, you may not make as much money, but you'll understand how the trades work out and they'll give you a chance to better use the software, right? So, I mean, why rush in and do a 0.03 on 10K or some higher number, as I've seen much, much higher versions of this? Because in other softwares, you can start off with a 0.1 and wind up with a 1 point on some of these higher sequence trades. So I don't know. I just always try to, sort of fall on the conservative side. Yeah. So look at that. So Mariska just posted here in a Q&A. It says, Neo chooses the lot size. So you can't even screw that up, right? I'm getting ready to set an account up at Neo, so I'll get a little more plugged in as to what it's doing. Stratomus is coming down the pike too, guys, so I got more stuff to learn. All right, USD, already went through that. What else? Yeah, I tell you, this is a good post you guys should read in the chat window by Satish. I like this. Leaders are focusing just on pyramid marketing, only do not guide anyone, and people are losing money because of it. Honestly, I've never seen, and by the way, we have a whole, for those that have been waiting, we have we've hired some very expensive attorneys, which has been, one of my big bitches this whole last year, right? Let's hire some big dogs. Yeah, I got to pay them a lot of money. But the cool thing about that is, they will help us complete, which I guess is almost finished, just a master compliance manual that we will be able to use across, it's almost like an articles of risk incorporation at the firm, right? And we will be able to use these articles to substantiate, any penalties we do for people that are not going the route of compliance, right? And I think it's great that, we're going to have essentially a blueprint that we can put in front of everybody that gives you exactly what kind of latitude you have in sharing information, right? As great as some of these MyFX books, I mean, look how well this one's done here. This is based on real money. This is the developer's account, right? This is based on mode 1 and 2. A lot of people will just show this stuff. I don't really show this much. And honestly, if I do some allocations into whatever software, for some client accounts that I'm managing, I'll never show this to clients, right? I'll just tell them it's done well. Many of them don't really care what I put them in, as long as I don't put the whole account in one stock, right? Or all in crypto. But I don't use this because, honestly, this is used to be a big problem back with tech stocks in the late 90s. And as I always will refer to it as, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, right? So you may have a great period of time where things are just killing it, and then tech stocks all just get completely clobbered like they did from the peak of 2000 into 03. And a lot of stuff just absolutely evaporated, and many people just got absolutely crushed, right? Because they had all their money in tech. It can happen. So the argument is always there among diversification. And it doesn't just have to be in Forex, right? You can be diversified in ETFs or mutual funds or stocks, and real estate, right? Crypto, if you want. Good luck. Buy low, sell high there. But honestly, I don't even show a lot of this stuff. I just tell them it's done well, right? Well, it's a relative thing. So there's the developer link. I'm going to pop this into yeah, do keep in mind, guys, the team leader's role, as Mariska just posted, is to make sure they guide you appropriately. That doesn't involve take your password, log into your MT4 platform, and hook up all your stuff. Nope, wouldn't do it. Risk, right? What if they screw something up? What if they've been drinking a bunch when they're in your account, right? Sounds ludicrous, but it's happened. and they forget some stuff. I mean, really want people messing around with your live dough. So just follow along. They may show you on a Zoom. That's cool. But just make sure you understand the process and they're not the one doing it. You are. They're guiding you along with that. Okay. There's risk in all this stuff, but it is not and most team leaders aren't expert traders like some of ours are. Um, like a Tyler, right? Or a Nathan. I mean, not all our team leaders are expert traders like those guys. But at the same time, their role is not to be your trader. It's to teach you how to fish and not to fish for you. Yeah, and just understand this too, Satish. I understand. Look, I get it. Okay. Do understand this. Some of the best traders in the world, I know everybody's gonna be like, well, I don't have all the money for that. Most of the best traders in the world, myself not included, only because I'm a rarity, right, have blown up big chunks of capital on the way to an education. Do I think that that's some sort of rite of passage? No, of course not. But they have blown up in many cases 10, 50. I know a number of traders that blew up almost 300K. Now they were making a lot of money, so maybe it wasn't important, but the point is they came back to the table and they fixed their wrongs, right? And they lived to trade another day, right? I personally, over the last 20 years, I've only blown up about 40K, right? And 2 of it was stupidity trades. And the other one was me just being a lazy ass trader, right? I learned from those mistakes, but it wasn't that big of a deal to me at the time because I had a ton of money from the sale of a piece of property. But I still pissed a chunk of it away, right? And everything was my fault. So, I went back to the drawing board, so to speak. This is like 2006, and begun to build out a better risk control process. And the very core of that control process in anything I do is I'm not willing to risk capital I cannot afford to lose, right? Yeah, so good discussion, guys. I think this is really important. And honestly, hey, maybe partially this is my fault because I don't even really address a lot of this stuff. I really don't. And maybe it's that I just live in this bubble of where I think everybody's perfectly trading and doing all the right stuff, right? For that, I apologize. Probably my own fault from that. But the key thing is diversification is really, really, really important. I can't tell you how many people, as I imagine some of you this may be new, that have blown up big chunks of capital just in the first quarter of this year because they were chasing some dream, right? I know personally of a guy that took $1 million of a house sale, which he should just probably use to pay off his other house, which is $1 million. And he blew the entire thing up in GameStop, the whole thing. So he got margined out, bought in way too high, put it all in one stock, boom, right? So he was a fool. Don't be a fool. What else? Let's see here. So it's good that everybody's in agreement with me on that. And, I'm not necessarily saying I don't want to preach to the chorus guys, but rather than give me a whole bunch of accolades I have here, take that discussion to somebody that's suffering, right? Do that, right? I don't care whether you guys love me or not, right? I'm always going to be the bad guy at this company, right? Sort of dishing out the real story. And they'll love it or hate it. Many of my students, they may have been pissed off at me at some point in the past, but I made them a better trader because I got them agitated and they got motivated. So just know that I'm always going to be pulling for you guys. But at the same time, we have a company that's growing tremendously, and we now have a guideline, which is good to follow along. And you guys will see me talk exhaustively about this April 24th, when we all do our big Tennessee kickoff event. So you guys get a chance to see my ugly ass in a suit on camera. But looking at that event, most of what I talk about is just going to be understanding risk and being able to manage it. And I promise you, everything that I'm going to teach and continue to talk about, I'm teaching to my 7th grade son, Evan. Right? He's getting all this stuff. He's watching these videos, and the kid is maniacal about learning this stuff. And he wants to be in all these areas. Forex, wants to trade futures, equities, all that. Probably because he's just sick of watching YouTube gaming videos now. So yeah, it's a good one there, Lewis. Diversification, sir. I agree. All right, so we are hiring some support people. I'm not sure what's going on there with this question here, but you can always ask another or open another ticket. I'm not sure what it was for. Maybe open up another ticket saying I've not heard back from you. Right? I would do that. I'm not support, guys. So, but what I can do is help you dial in your risk management. And I would encourage everybody to hook up a MyFX book to their accounts, or FX Blue, right? Seems to be a little easier in some cases, right? Getting that double check verified is a little more difficult to do. And I just got a question about that. So let me show you guys what I'm talking about. So here's the Neo developers account. See right here. Oops. See these double check marks? This is what you want. There's developers info. Calendar. I don't think anyone want to say anything more about that. And honestly, I've been squawking for 55 minutes here. So anybody else got any questions on anything? Okay, so I get this question a lot, and I got to tell you, Mark, I applaud your effort. I'm not sure where part of the world you are in, but make sure you put that type of passion towards everybody showing up to all of the calls, or at the very least, you guys watching the calls and paraphrasing what us and the developers are talking about each week relative to the problem I have with Alexander and Einstein is the following. Okay, one, the developers should host, at the very least, a call once a month, maybe even once a week, right? We don't have that, okay? This isn't a blame game for me, okay? That's a big issue with me, all right? The unwillingness to come in and help with adjustments of settings, because in many cases, I guess this doesn't apply to everybody, the developers have put together the best analysis of their software that's out there. The many they run it through, as I personally know that Bill and Riley, the developers of Alexander Einstein, same thing. One just gives you manual trades, the other is automated. They're just unresponsive in talking to myself. And I really think there needs to be a weekly call on that. The other problem is that and I don't care whether it's the MAV version of it, which is Alexander, or the automated version is Einstein, is there's just too many things settings wise that have to be constantly adjusted. Okay. Do know that it can be done, right? And this is kind of why Gearbox is going to be a much better version of those two, depending upon its levels of trades that it takes, right? I think ultimately the other problem I have with most of the software is that it's unwilling to make changes from a basing or a trending type of move, right, up or down, right, trending, to some sort of auctioning period where we're just basing in a pattern, bouncing around between, two lines, right? The ability of the software to be able to morph into the other trend up or down from some sort of flat period where it's trading over is critically important to the dynamics of how effective the software is win rate wise. So that's all I'm going to say on that. But in all fairness to the argument, there has been some out there with a lot of adjustment that have actually made Einstein and Alexander work for them pretty well over the last year. So I think the good core base is there, but unfortunately for the masses, not sure many of them are up to the education needed in order to be able to run it. So that's just my opinion. Prove me wrong. Happy to look at that. I always hope I'm wrong to everybody's benefit, quite frankly. Let's see here. Got some good chat going on in the chat window. I like this. So yeah, do keep in mind you want to demo this stuff, obviously, guys, before you start turning live money on it. But that's pretty much it. So spread the word. It's really the best thing you guys can do for your team. Make sure that they're attending, right? Our team, our team is literally they know they're going to be scolded from yours truly if they've made a mistake. And so I think for that reason, many of them won't show me accounts they have in drawdown because they knew it was their fault for whatever particular setting they were lacking and adjusting, or the risk parameters were too high. But hey, you can only lead a horse to water, right? So, but thank you everybody for your time. I wish everybody a happy weekend. And you guys are probably sick of hearing me talk. It's now an hour past the time. So everybody have a great weekend. May the trades be with you. Be kind to each other. It will get better.